Nation, welcome to another episode of UNC Hoops Talk. This month we are diving into player expectations, and to talk about that this month, I brought in Blake from keepingitheel.com. And Blake, how you doing? Anything else you want to add to that intro there, and how are we looking this year?
I'm doing good, Dan. Thanks for having me. I write for Keeping It Heel. Also write for another website called bustingbrackets.com. It's more of a general basketball website. We kind of cover everything on there. Keeping It Heel is where I sort of started off at. And I think we're looking good. I think we've got a lot of good things to look forward to this year. I think the expectations are going to be high, obviously, but definitely a lot to look forward to.
So you're one of those crazy fans that, just like me, that can't leave it as just cheering for the team. We got to go above and beyond and either do a podcast or write about the Tar Heels, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I've spent way too much time writing, talking, thinking about the Tar Heels. At this point, it's second nature. That's
right. And we wouldn't have it any other way. So, like I said, going to jump into player expectations. I want to just thank everybody for listening. Go ahead and subscribe to the podcast if you like it. And also, if you are listening to this podcast, or if you found this through Blake or because of Blake being on it, I'd love to hear that. Hit me up on Twitter, @AllTarHeelDan. All the links to anything that we talk about or social media stuff will be in the description. I'll make sure I got Blake's Twitter in there. Go give him a follow. Tons of engaging content. You are, again, like me, constantly on Twitter and talking Tar Heel basketball, right?
All the time, guys. I'd say out of my most of my Twitter time, probably 95% of it's directed toward Tar Heel basketball and football and the other sports as well, but definitely basketball. A lot of my time dedicated to that.
Right. We can't forget about Tar Heel football. They're looking good right now. But all right, all the intro stuff out of the way. So the first thing I kind of threw up at you is projected starting lineups. I don't care if you want to go first or second, but what do you got for projected starting lineups this year?
I think it's fairly simple. It's going to be Barry, Pinson, Jackson, Hicks, and Meeks. I don't think there's really any way around that. I think it could change throughout the season depending on performance, both of the starters and, somebody off the bench. I don't think it's unthinkable that Pinson could get unseated at that starting position, but I don't think it's likely either. I don't really see a guy like Nate Britt starting. I don't see him taking those kind of minutes. I think Pinson is much better suited for that role, although he's not a traditional shooting guard and really not that great of a shooter. I do think he has sort of the all-around game and the intangibles that Roy Williams likes to see from that position. And we've seen guys fill that role in the past that weren't necessarily great shooters. We saw Jackie Manuel play the two guard quite a bit when Rashad McCants wasn't in the game, in the 2004, 2005, time span. We've also seen guys like Marcus Ginyard play a little bit of that shooting guard role, when guys like Wayne Ellington or Danny Green were in the game. So certainly he's not the prototypical two that you want in there in terms of shooting, but I do think he's very versatile. I think he's got a lot of fire, and I think he's really athletic. So if he can continue to become a better shooter, I don't think anybody is going to sort of dethrone him from that starting position. But I would like to see some competition there from a guy like Seventh Woods. I'd love to see him really push Theo Pinson and really make him perform well. The only other thing that I can see happening, and I think this is a really bad thing for the Tar Heels if this happens, is if a guy like Tony Bradley ends up in the starting lineup. Roy Williams does not like to put freshmen in the lineup over upperclassmen. If we see a situation where Tony Bradley ends up replacing a guy like, Kennedy Meeks, for instance, I think it's a bad thing because I think it means that Kennedy Meeks is playing well under expectations. So while I want Tony Bradley to perform well, I think we need Kennedy Meeks to be much better than that. And we need him to be the player that we certainly hoped and thought he would be a couple of years ago.
Yeah, we've been waiting a couple of years for that. So I have the exact same starting lineup that I put down as my projected starting lineup. And then you kind of hit the only spot that I said if there's any change, it would be Pinson being unseated, because we've seen with Roy that he likes, two ball handlers in at the same time. And like you said, Pinson's not a typical shooting guard, let alone, another point guard on the court. So, I put down Britt because he's a point guard, or otherwise, Seventh Woods, depending on, how he grasps the college game and pushes for those minutes. But that's And like you said, Pinson is that, potentially defender out there that you can put on kind of anybody, energy guy, a guy that Roy likes to reward with a starting lineup or with a starting spot and minutes that way. So on the same page there. And like you said, I don't think it's too difficult to predict that because, again, Roy likes to give those upperclassmen the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, with Kennedy starting for a couple of years, if he's not starting, then yeah, that's really bad because he hasn't reached the potential that we've expected. So speaking of Seventh Woods in there, moving on to the impact of the freshmen. So we have Tony Bradley, as you mentioned, as a big guy, Seventh Woods in the guard spot, and then we also have Brandon Robinson in the wing spot. What do you expect? What kind of impact do you expect from them this year, if at all?
I like Seventh Woods a lot. I have for years. We've been talking about this guy, watching this guy play since he was 14 years old. That's when that video came out, and since then it's got 14 million views. So I think most even pedestrian college basketball fans are fairly well aware of Seventh Woods and what he potentially brings to the table. Now, I don't think that he progressed the way that people thought he would from the time he was 14, but I do think he still brings a lot, certainly athletically, to the table. And I think he fits in well to North Carolina's system, run and gun, up and down, fast break. He's a guy that, in Roy Williams' offense in particular, can be very deadly and be very dangerous. When I think of Seventh Woods, I do think of Dexter Strickland, good or bad. That's going to get reactions both ways from Tar Heel fans. I think he's a better version of Dexter Strickland.
Well, the thing we forget about Dexter is he got hurt so much.
He did. And Dexter,
he was really athletic.
But in terms of athleticism, I think they're sort of the same type player. Now, I do think Woods, at this point in each of their respective careers, when freshman on freshman, I think that Woods is better, both athletically and from a basketball standpoint. I also think he's a better shooter. He's worked on his shot a lot. His shot is much better than it was a year or two years ago. And that's something that we never saw progress with Dexter Strickland. He always had a hitch in his shot. He always he just had an awkward jump shot that never seemed to get better. He was fading away half the time. The things that we got tired of seeing with Dexter Strickland are the things that never changed. And I don't think it was for lack of caring or trying or something. It never seemed to get better. And I think he tried to work on it, but it never got there. I think Seventh Woods will be much better. And, on top of that, I think he's a 3 or 4 year player almost no matter what. So he's going to be a really valuable asset over the next several years. And he's a guy that I could definitely see starting next season. In fact, I think he will start next season. And then you talk about a guy like Brandon Robinson. According to everyone who's had anything to do with the program in the last couple of months, this guy's hitting shots like crazy. And he's apparently ready to come in and start knocking down shots now. Having said that, I don't think that he's going to take 25 minutes a game. I think this is a guy that's going to come in and probably play 15, 17 minutes a game maximum, depending on how effective he is. I think that he is going to be a very good shooter, and I think he may be our best option at 3 at some point this season. Now, I still think right now our best consistent three-point threat is going to be Joel Berry. I think Joel Berry is going to be our best three-point shooter going into the season. I don't know that it'll stay that way. I hope Robinson eclipses him and gives us that reliable scorer from the perimeter. And if he can do that, he's going to take even more minutes than I think he will. And then Tony Bradley, I think, is going to have the biggest impact. We're very short-handed in the front court. When you talk about Hicks and Meeks, that's really where it stops. There's other guys in there that aren't going to take a lot of minutes, but Tony Bradley is a guy that I think comes in right from the start and plays over 20 minutes a game. And I think he can be effective right from the start. Now, we haven't seen him play a single college game yet. We know he's got good hands. He's got good footwork. He does very well in the paint. He's got good size. We're just going to have to see how well he gets acclimated to the college game. But I think there's no doubt he's going to be an impact player. And I think for us to do well this year, he's going to have to do extremely well off the bench.
Yeah, especially with Meeks at the center. We always hear about how much weight he loses in the offseason, and then it seems like he still can only play about the same amount of minutes. And then, Roy's already addressed Isaiah Hicks' foul trouble and stuff, with him getting a bigger role. I think I don't think it's going to be that a big an issue. He'll figure it out and play extended minutes. But with both those potentially being there, he's definitely the most important freshman I think that we have coming in, and the biggest opportunity for impact will be Tony Bradley. So you kind of gave, minutes and a little bit of expectations for Bradley and Robinson. What about Woods? What do you kind of said what you hope. What do you think is reasonable from him?
I haven't really thought about it with Woods. I really think he's going to be more of an energy guy, a guy that comes in there and he helps spell, Barry and Pinson. I think he'll play both guard positions at some point because he's capable of playing both guard positions now. But I want him in there full time as a point guard. No, I would prefer him right now as the two, especially given that his shot has gotten better. I really think that Woods probably plays probably around the same minutes as a Robinson does. I think he probably plays maybe 15 minutes to start, something like that. He's coming in, giving guys a breather. We've got a lot of guys in the backcourt, so we're not hurting, in terms of your Barry, Pinson, Britt, Woods, Robinson. We've got all those guys, to come in and rotate minutes. So it is going to be, I think, a push for guys to play well. I think it's going to make guys, go out there and really take advantage of the minutes they're getting. I think whichever one, plays the best is going to obviously see the benefit of that. So if I had to guess right now, I think maybe Woods, averages something like, maybe 6 points a game, dishes out a couple of assists and grabs a couple of rebounds. I don't think it's going to be anything amazing or impressive or eye-popping. I think they're going to be important minutes, maybe more though for Barry and Pinson from a rest and endurance standpoint than it is from a stat sheet perspective. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope he comes in and absolutely makes me look stupid. But I don't see his impact on the box score being what it will be in another year.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's kind of like when Pinson first came in. Anything we kind of got from him was just an added bonus. And, the more playing time he got, obviously the more comfortable he got. So I think Woods is kind of the same way. And even energy-wise, Pinson was an energy guy off the bench, and Woods can be that way. For me, Brandon Robinson, really the only backup at 3 behind Justin Jackson. We have obviously Pinson can slide over and play 3 and mix up the lineup a little bit. But really, Brandon Robinson's battling Kenny Williams for that backup spot, right? Is there somebody I'm missing there?
I think Brandon Robinson will shift between the 2 and the 3, like you said. I think you'll see Kenny Williams do the same thing. And, really, obviously Jackson's got a strong hold on that spot. But I do think you'll see Williams and Robinson battle it out for that spot. But I also think they're both versatile enough that they can switch between the 2 spots, which is helpful. Both for the team and for them, because it doesn't, eliminate a position they could fill, especially with that loaded backcourt. I look for pretty good things from Kenny Williams this season. He's a really good player. And last year he showed it both offensively and defensively. He started to kind of come around offensively. The further we got into the season, we kind of, saw him knock down his first 3, and we all cheered. And we're like, okay, it finally happened. But defensively, he was really good. And I think he's got an opportunity to be a kind of a lockdown defender, an energy guy. He's never going to be a guy that logs 34 minutes a game. So I think he's going to be a guy that has to sort of hang his hat on, coming in there and making the most of his minutes, being that energy defender, being, a real fire starter off the bench. And I think he can hit shots too. He kind of reminds me of a guy like a Rayshon Terry, and I've said that for a while now. And I'm a big fan of Rayshon Terry. Rayshon Terry, when he first got to North Carolina, was a mess. You could barely let him on the court. He was a liability with the ball. He couldn't handle it. He couldn't shoot. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't find his way to the locker room after the game. But by the time he got to his junior year, the guy was phenomenal. He was fantastic. And in his senior year, he was one of the biggest reasons why we made it to the Elite Eight against Georgetown. And he was one of the biggest reasons why we almost beat Georgetown in that game and ended up choking away a lead that we never shouldn't have. I'm still a little bit upset about that game. But I think Kenny Williams is the same type of guy. I think he's a guy that's going to come around. He's going to be very good by the time he's a junior and certainly a senior. And Robinson, I think, will probably progress a little faster. I think Robinson will be a really good player by next year. I think he'll be a real impact player. So I expect big things out of both of them. And our backcourt for the next few years is very loaded. A lot of potential, a lot of star power, especially, when you're talking about guys like Julie Felton coming in, Rashawn Black, Kobe White. These guys are going to keep our backcourt extremely stable for the next few years. And at the same time, likely that none of them are one-year players. They're all going to be at least 2 to 3 year players. So now if we can work on that front court that's thinning quickly, then we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, Roy's going to have to take up the Golden State Warriors offense and go small ball or something.
Yeah, he's going to have to.
And one other thing about Woods, Seventh Woods, you mentioned, the dunk. I've been waiting for him to get on campus ever since, just to throw up Vine highlights as he goes in the lane and dunks over people. But let's keep moving on.
The first thing he did on campus was go and dunk on a student, and it was all over. Yeah. So I like it.
Yeah, you can't shy away from that stuff. All right, so let's keep moving on here. We obviously lose Marcus Page, Brice Johnson, staples for the last 4 years. Who steps in to take the leadership roles? And then, the monster year Brice had last year, the production that we lose from them. Who steps up there?
So for the leadership part, I think it's obvious that it's got to be Joel Berry. I don't think there's any question it's Joel Berry. He's got the mentality. He's got the fire in him. He's a vocal leader. The guys listen to him. They like him. And he's our best player. Flat out, he's our best player. If we're going to have any chance of doing anything this year, he's going to have to be the guy. Both offensively and from a vocal standpoint, he'll be the guy. And I think he'll do just fine in that role, because I think he did an excellent job last year when he wasn't even really the leader on the team. He wasn't even the guy. But I think he showed those qualities. And I think he showed the ability to not only be a star, in terms of on the court, but, having the guys really come around him and rally around him, just with his attitude and with his mindset. So I think he'll certainly be that guy. And I think he's got every chance to be as good or maybe even better than Marcus Page. Now, will he hit as many threes in his career? No. But in terms of being a natural scorer, ability to drive and dribble in the lane and create offense and even, step up and make his own shot, I think he'll be great. I think he's got a chance to be as good as Marcus Page was in that area. Not to be a damper, but in terms of who steps up and takes that Brice Johnson role, I don't think anyone does. And this may come as a shock, or maybe some fans are not seeing it this way. And I could be completely wrong, but I don't think I am. And Brice Johnson was huge last year. He was very effective. He was incredible at just about every part of the game. And I don't know that people realize outside the numbers how good he was. And, he gets his name in the Raptors, and he was a first-team All-American. That's all fine and good. But when you look at what he actually did, I mean, he had a player efficiency rating of 33. That's outstanding. That's absurd. That was better than Buddy Hield. It was better than Denzel Valentine. It was better than Ben Simmons. It was better than anybody of any name, that I can throw out there that people are going to be familiar with. What he did, simply put, was he was fantastic. Forget the Florida State game, the Duke game. He was just consistent. And the fact that he was able to rebound over 30% of the balls in his area, which is a great number, is impressive. And the bad thing is, granted, they didn't have as much playing time or opportunity maybe, and Brice Johnson stole a lot of the rebounds, but Kennedy Meeks is a vast drop-off in that metric. I think Kennedy only got like 15% of the rebounds in his area, whereas Brice had more than double that. So granted, Brice was stealing some of those boards, but at the same time, we've seen that Kennedy Meeks isn't that effective of a player when you're comparing him to a guy like Brice Johnson. Brice Johnson was supremely athletic. He was a high flyer, very effective in the post. He shot over 60%. So I don't think anybody replaces that. Now, if we're going to have a chance to do big things this year, we're obviously going to have those two guys step up. Meeks and Hicks are going to have to be big. When you look at a guy like Hicks, in terms of his per 40 averages, were pretty good when you compare him to Brice. I think Brice per 40, I think he averaged 24 points and 14-something rebounds, averaged out over 40 minutes. And I think Isaiah was somewhere around 19 and 10. So, if he can stay in the game, then I think he's going to be a great player. That's the big question. And like you said, Roy has talked about that. Per 40 minutes, he averaged 7 fouls a game. So, and he averaged more fouls than Brice Johnson, and he played 10 less minutes. So I know that Isaiah's been working on this. I know he spent a lot of time in the summer, and Roy has covered it. But once he learns how to find the difference between being aggressive and silly fouls, that's when Isaiah Hicks will truly take that next step, because he's got the athleticism, he's got the game, but he's got to stay in the game. So I think there's going to be a big drop-off from Brice Johnson. And I hate to say that, but I think there is. And it'll take a lot of stepping up by those two and the freshman Tony Bradley.
No, yeah, I was right on the same page with you. For leadership, I put, Barry, and then I put kind of a question mark with Pinson too, because of the energy guy he was, and he is kind of very vocal, and just even not even vocal, I guess, but just his body language is so strong that I think people follow that. So and I think hopefully too, getting guys in the gym and pulling guys along, and also just keeping guys loose. We know it's important to have chemistry and just keeping guys loose. So I think Pinson in that way as a leader, and then production too. I said collective. You hit on the big guys, Meeks and Hicks, but it's really got to be everybody. Theo Pinson has to put up better stats. Joel Berry's, he had a good year, if not great year as a point guard last year for us. But he's going to have to be more efficient. Justin Jackson has to be more consistent and more efficient. So, yeah, I don't think we're going to see a Brice. I don't think anybody saw Brice doing what Brice did last year. But I don't foresee anybody stepping up into that role either. It's going to have to be everybody. So I'm going to put these last two kind of together. I put down who's going to make the biggest jump from last year to this year, and then who's our X factor this year. When it comes down to it, our season falls on who?
I'd love to say that Jackson is the guy that makes that jump. But so far, and I really like Justin Jackson. I'm a big fan of Justin Jackson. But so far, we don't have any evidence to show us that he's going to make that jump. His first two seasons at North Carolina, he shot 29 and 30% from three. He's not a big, strong guy. He's not going to be a dominant force inside. So while he's very good with the floater in the mid-range, if he doesn't develop more of an outside game, he's not going to be the player that's going to sort of get us over the hump. He's not going to be that guy that's going to put up 22 points and whatever a game, because I just don't see it happening without that three-point shot, being part of his game. So I'd love to think that it's going to be Jackson, and I hope he comes out and he does what we've been talking about and wanting for 2 years. I just don't know if that happens. I really think it's down to two guys. It's either going to be Barry, and I know it's insane to think that he makes another huge jump, but I really think he's capable of that, or Isaiah Hicks. Isaiah Hicks, it would be easy to make a huge jump. All he's got to do is stay in the game. Just by virtue of playing more minutes, he could just about double his stat line. He only averaged, I think, 8.9 points and, what he averaged, 5-6 rebounds a game. So if he could just stay in the game and play 25 minutes a game, he's a guy that's got a chance to average double-double. But I really think the guy that continues to climb upward is Barry. I think, even when you look at his stats as a freshman to sophomore, he increased his points per game by around 8 points, and better his assists and his rebounds and everything. He's got a decent assist to turnover ratio. He's the guy that I think is going to continue to get better. I think you're going to see him, pass the ball well this year, but at the same time, I think he's going to know when it's time to call his own number. I think he knows he's a playmaker. He's a good shooter. If he can increase his three-point percentage a little bit, he'll be even more effective. But I think he's the guy that continues to climb upward. I think he's got a chance to be an All-American this year. And, if you can get him and you get Hicks to stay out of foul trouble, I think you've got a chance to be very good again. If I had to say that there was going to be an X factor, I would say the bench. I think the depth is what's going to be the X factor, because I don't think we can rely on the same star power that we did last year. Without Brice Johnson, even if you substitute Barry and Page, just say that that's an even flip. Just say that, obviously with a struggling Page the last 2 years, it's pretty easy to make that argument that that's a one-for-one switch. You still don't have that high-low game that you had. You don't have the ability to just throw the ball in there and hope for good things. You can't do it. So I think the bench, the depth, I think, the freshman Tony Bradley stepping up, I think that's going to be the X factor. I think just all-around consistent basketball from everybody is what it's going to take. And I do think it's going to take guys like Pinson being more consistent, and if Pinson can develop that shot. So I think there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of ifs. But I do think that there is a pretty high floor for the season. I don't see any way we don't win 25 games. Now I know if we only win 25 games, the Target Nation's going to flip out and want to fire Roy. But that's still a pretty high floor compared to most other Division I programs.
That's going to happen no matter what.
Right. We're all going to want to fire Roy no matter what. Everybody's going to be screaming for his job, and it's the same old thing every single year. I think we got a high floor, and I think we got a pretty high ceiling. I don't think that we repeat what we did last year in terms of, getting to the championship game. I mean, if I had to say, but then last year, I don't know that I would have predicted it either. So it depends on what happens at the end of the season. Depends on how well everyone progresses. If Kimmy Meeks can learn how to jump this year and stay conditioned, that would go a long way as well.
And injuries can always change the seasons for any team. But
that's one thing. I don't think we can afford any injuries this year.
Right.
For sure, we can't afford any injuries, especially any injuries to anybody. Like if Joel Berry were to get hurt, knock on wood, the season's over.
Right. So I'm looking for a place to disagree with you and make this a little more compelling. But I wrote down kind of the same people. Again, biggest jumps. If you're looking at stats, I think it's Hicks, just because there is all that room that you talked about. But as far as the biggest impact or overall improvement, I put down Barry too. I think there's just so much that he can control the game. I mean, I think he did a great job last year, but everybody kind of knew stuff was going through Marcus Page. Now the ball's going to be in his hands. He's making all the decisions. But that does lead me. Last question here. You can make it as quick or as long as you want, but tie ball game or one possession ball game at the end. We knew the ball was going to Page last year. Who gets
Barry.
It this year?
It's Barry.
Is he shooting or passing?
I want him shooting it. And, maybe my confidence in Barry is too high, but he's the guy right now for me that is the biggest, playmaker, the biggest, game changer out there. He's the guy that's confident. I mean, look at the way he played the national championship. He single-handedly kept us in that game. I mean, he scored 20 points, most of it in the first half.
And he was hurt, too.
We're not even in that game if it's not for Barry. Now, horrible calls aside and everything else, and I don't even want to start thinking about it.
Yeah, don't bring it up.
Without Barry, he's the guy that I want shooting the ball at the end of the game. Now, if we had a guy like Bryce Johnson still, I'd say, okay, I want the ball in Barry's hands. I want him passing it down and Bryce finishing. But again, we don't have a Bryce this year. We don't have a Tyler Hansbrough. We don't have a Sean May. And if we did, I'd be saying national championship or bust right now. But we're going to have to see how the big guys do down low before we can, sort of have a whole, assessment of where we think we're going to go. But for me, it's Barry. I don't see anybody else on the roster that's consistent enough that I would want taking that shot.
All right, well, hold off on your predictions because that's next month's podcast. So I'm going to go through, the schedule. I don't know if in the past I've done it game to game and kind of tried to predict every game. I don't know if I'll do it that way. I may, just kind of walk through the non-conference, conference schedules and stuff like that, and then give an overall prediction. But that's the next podcast. So you're more than welcome to come back onto that one. Everybody, thanks for listening. Blake, thanks for coming on. It was great. Make sure you go follow Blake on Twitter. Check out Keeping It Heel, where he's writing all kind of, not crazy stuff. It's not crazy stuff, but all kinds of articles and throwing that stuff up. And again, let me know if you are listening to this or found this because of Blake. Hit me up on Twitter. And that's all we got. Until next time, go Heels.
Go Heels. Thanks for having me.